So I'm Andrea Huntington with Indiana Land Protection Alliance. We'd like to start by thanking the Department of Natural Resources for this opportunity to learn about and participate in the new Next Level Conservation Trust program. Our speakers are DNR Director Dan Bortner and Tom Laycock, Director of Land Acquisition for DNR. Dan and Tom, thank you both so much for your time and work on this program and for meeting with us today. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Director Bortner, but I see that we still have folks coming into the room. So wondering if we want to wait just a few more minutes. And again, for folks coming in, please stay muted, keep your cameras off during the presentation. And if you have questions, please place those in the chat throughout.
We will wait for your lead, Andrea.
Thank you. All right, I stopped hearing the doorbell sound notification. So Director Bortner, I think you can kick us off.
Well, thank you, Andrea. I appreciate that. Pardon me for the kind of the loss of voice here. I'm fighting that evil COVID stuff. About got it beat now, but making it a little hard to talk. So I apologize if I sound a little bit raspy. Welcome, everybody. This day has been a little while coming. We're glad to be at this point now. We're excited about it. And thank you for joining us. Before I turn it back over to Tom here in just a second to discuss logistics of this, I just want to take a brief moment to say thank you to Governor Holcomb and to the General Assembly for making these partnerships possible. You know, if you'd have told us 18 months ago that there was $25 million coming our way to be able to partner with groups to do some amazing things, and especially with the level of a partnership here, a 3-to-1 match. I mean, those things I would have asked you to put it in writing. Well, the governor did, so here we are. So we've got $25 million to be leveraged with you, our partners, to continue the DNR legacy of land protection here in the Hoosier State. We really look forward to working with all of you to conserve, you know, the whole legacy of conservation and the partnerships that have come before us, being able to take what was the Bicentennial Nature Trust, move it over into the Next Level Conservation Trust, and really having all the pieces in place to just plug it in has been a true blessing for us. And so we look forward to this. Obviously, you're going to have a lot of questions. That's what we're hopefully able to answer most of those for you today. When this gets going, please don't dally with the high end of the contributions that will come through on this. Yes, $25 million is a lot of money, but we don't expect it to last a long time. So be diligent in getting your information together. Be diligent in the quality applications that you put in, because those types of things will make a difference. So once again, thank you for being a partner here with this. We certainly hope to make this go as far as we possibly can. And we appreciate you for everything that you do day in and day out to make these types of things work and for the conservation level in the state of Indiana. So with that, Tom, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'll hang around throughout the meeting, and hopefully we can answer some things that folks may need to know.
Thank you, Dan. Let's just a little bit of history here. I think everyone knows that the Bicentennial Nature Trust was funded, and it actually expired in about 2016. So we are just in this program trying to extend the good works that $30 million program did. That was $20 million in state funds and $10 million from the Lilly Foundation. This $25 million is the largest single state infusion of capital into the conservation programs in our state's history. So we have a unique opportunity. It is rather complicated. It has taken us a year to get to this point, to where we're making this launch, as Dan noted. So we are pretty much ready to go forward with this program at this point. I think that being said, let's go ahead and what happened to my program? Just a second. What happened to my program, Andrea? It was here. Hold on a second. We just had this up there it is. Here we go. You can tell I'm not real good at working these things.
Doing great. I think you want to go up to the presentation.
I do, but I can't get there because it's behind the bar on my screen.
Try clicking this little icon at the top, Tom, next to the one to the right of the save.
The one that's to the right of the save.
At the very, so you have auto save off, the save icon, and then the,
Okay, we'll get back here in just a second, folks.
Yep, go over one.
I can't get to there, Andrea. That's what I'm saying.
Oh,
It's behind my screen. Let's see. Oh, here it is. I can get to it down here. Let me switch screens real quick. Okay, and this is, again, it's behind my taskbar is not showing.
oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Can you just direct Andrea to switch the screens, or is that not possible?
We could, yeah.
I don't think I can
Here,
control your
minimize
screen
this.
though, Tom.
Pardon?
Oh, I said
You
I don't
can't
think I
control
can
my
control
screen?
your screen. Yeah.
Okay, well, we're having a slight glitch here, so we're just going to go ahead on this kind of split screen. So unfortunately, thank you for your understanding. If somebody knows how to do this, let me know. But so, okay. So the Next Level Conservation Trust 2022. This is going to be an extension of the Bicentennial Nature Trust. This is the mission statement that we used for the Bicentennial Nature Trust. The Next Level Conservation Trust is established as a mechanism to ensure Indiana's rich natural history is preserved or enhanced for succeeding generations by acquiring interests or real property that is an example of outstanding natural features, has historical or archaeological significance, and provides areas of conservation, outdoor recreation, or the restoration of native biological diversity. A couple of things in here are important. I want you to consider that we need to be focused on public health and providing outdoor recreational opportunities in this program to the extent that we can. We'll talk about that here in just a minute. The concept, of course, is to rebrand, as Dan said, and extend the successful Bicentennial Nature Trust program, to run the new Next Level Conservation Trust program through the Benjamin Harrison Project Committee facilities, which is exactly what we did under Bicentennial, and to have the proven successes of Bicentennial as well as the successful elements of the President Benjamin Harrison Conservation Trust. I'm skimming through this all pretty fast because this is just stuff that you've already heard before in a lot of publications. Of course, our goal is to positively impact every region in the state of Indiana. The property protected under the Next Level Conservation Trust is to be open to the public for the promotion of public health and increased quality of life. The program scoring will be weighted to new conservation land protections. The initial funding for the Next Level Conservation Trust was established in the current state budget as $25 million for conservation land acquisition. As opposed, we also got in that same budget $60 million for addition to the Next Level Trails program. Funding for the Next Level Conservation Trust is from reallocation of American Rescue Plan funding provided to the state. The ARP funding is directed to responding to the impacts of the public health emergency. So the promotion of public health and increased quality of life is within the goal of the American Rescue Plan funding programs. This is the critical element. This is what has taken us so long to get to. We have worked diligently with other divisions of state government to make sure that what we are doing is going to comply with the ARP programs. I think the highlights of the program that we want to get into now are going to be pretty important to everyone. There is a $100,000 minimum of Next Level Conservation Trust funding per project. The maximum is no maximum per project. So everybody understand that this money is going to go pretty quickly. The money in the account may be used for the general purposes of the cost of acquisition of real property or an interest in real property and associated acquisition costs such as closing costs, title insurance, and other activities associated with the transfer of title to the program maximum of 75% of the appraised value plus verified costs or the purchase price plus verified costs. We're going to talk a lot about this probably in the questioning, but I just want to get this all out first. The cost of necessary services and expensive incidental to the acquisition is also eligible under the verifiable cost clause, such as engineering, appraisal, surveys, etc. That again is limited to 75% of the value plus those verified costs or the purchase price plus the verified costs. And I want to highlight here that where we talk about value plus costs, that's the total of value plus costs by 75%, which is the match ratio in this program. The Next Level Conservation Trust funds are not to be used for trail corridor acquisitions. Those will be handled under the Next Level Trails program. Stewardship, capital improvements, grantor's staff, construction of structures, removal or remediation of hazardous substances or wastewater treatment. The program, as I just mentioned, will require an overall program match of 3-to-1 state funds invested to outside funding match, or a 25, 75, 25 funding match program. Match funds can include property donated to or for the benefit of the approved project, including bargain sale value. Funds from other state programs like the President Benjamin Harrison Conservation Trust. Addition of property adjoining the proposed project that enhances the project's conservation values. This is what we'll talk about in a little bit is portfolio funding. The value of other property held by nonprofits or federal government that will be dedicated to the project. That's part of this portfolio funding scenario. And then federal, state, local nonprofit, including the Natural Resource Foundation, or private monies given, donated, or directed directly to the approved project through the state, through the state for an approved project. I want to make one point here where we talk about federal monies. There is still some uncertainty whether ARP funds coming from a different source can be used as match for this ARP funded program. We also know positively that there are some federal programs that could be used as match For example, the Land and Water Conservation Fund and the Lake Michigan Coastal Program, neither of those programs will allow ARP funding to be used as match on their programs. So that will concern some of you, particularly doing parks developments or up in the lakes region. So federal monies, I want to make sure that everybody understands, are subject to the program from which those federal funds are being paid, okay? We can talk about that more when we get down to questions. This is what we call our portfolio project scenario. Financially capable conservation partners and land trusts may submit portfolios of projects for consideration under a single project application. I'm going to stress here, there is a standard, a high standard of reasonableness here. And we will evaluate the portfolios on multiple criteria. And the first being is whether it is reasonable and prudent. I would say that we are not wanting to see one or two groups or DNR divisions attack this fund aggressively and try to get all of the money that they can garner, leaving other smaller and non-timely applications to founder. Part of the scenarios that we have to work on under the ARP funding, we have very strict timeframes on this project. There are 4 major timeframes that we have to look at. The first being in June of 23, the funds that are not committed under this program revert to the state budget and will have to be reallocated. I'm pretty confident that under this administration that those funds would be reallocated. The next definite time frame that we have is December of 2024. Any uncommitted funds after December of 2024, pursuant to information that we have from the state budget agency, will revert to the United States Treasury. Those funds will be permanently gone. So let's see, the next date that we have would be the budget expiration in 2025. We don't know what administration is going to be there and whether or not the funds would be considered to still be available by that period of time. The final date that we have is projects must be closed and fully funded, the money out our doors, by December, the end of December of 2026. Any money unspent at that time could revert to the United States Treasury pursuant to the ARP guidance. I don't expect there to be any money, hardly any money by the time we get to the budget in 2023, much less 2024. But when we look at these portfolios, if a project within this portfolio falls apart within that 2024 guidance period, this is where the reasonableness standard comes in. If something would fall apart, that money is gone and cannot be reused by any other applicant under this program. So let's go on with the portfolio stuff. Projects portfolio need to be sized in a reasonable size to close within the applicable ARP funding cycles. Portfolios can mix new acquisitions and match them against existing properties held by the sponsor. Portfolios do not require adjacent properties, but it will be helpful for scoring if the properties are somewhat localized. All properties within the portfolio will be expected to close simultaneously. So it's not a spread out application thing. All properties within the portfolio will be reviewed independently, and any existing restrictions on the properties will be considered as part of the valuation of the properties. Restrictions would be something similar to, you've got a property with a conservation easement on it and you want to transfer it from one entity to another. The value is the encumbered value of the property, not the fee simple value of the property. I'm sure we'll have more questions about this when we get to the question section, but let's continue. Additional donated funds will be sought or may be sought under this program to increase the investment, but those funds, because of the ARP funding scenario, will go to offset the program match. They will not be used to increase the funding capacity of the program. As in BNT, we had 20 million of state funds that were enhanced by $10 million of Lilly funds, and we considered it a $30 million fund. This will remain a $25 million fund. Donated funds, if we have someone come in and want to put $5 million into this program, for example, donated funds would be then, we would try to use those as dedicated match directed to specific projects or project applications. This is a long scenario. How it works in reality is something we will have to see as we go through the projects. Who can propose projects? There are going to be three basic sources of projects: financially capable conservation groups, NGOs, land trusts, governmental or quasi-governmental obligations with strong local support, or DNR divisions. Probably the one thing you're going to see in there, probably we don't have in here corporations or private entities that would be looking to do conservation projects. This program is so going to be so quickly moving that it might be hard to bring those organizations up to a standard that we need. The review for projects is going to be very similar to what you've all experienced under the Bicentennial or President Benjamin Harrison Conservation Trust. Projects will be submitted and then reviewed for correctness, form, structure, completeness, etc. And it will give the projects, hopefully have time to give the projects time to correct any deficiencies. The projects will then be reviewed by the DNR technical staff for substance and scoring. And then the projects will be finally scored and ranked according to the specific criteria in the scoring form. I will note at this point, and we'll discuss it toward the end of this little presentation here, we have changed the scoring matrix rubric that is posted on the website to make it more project specific and less community involvement specific. We still have a lot of community involvement. About 19 points of the 52 points possible are community points. But we've skewed it more to, I think 33 or 34 points are now in the project, about the project specific criteria. The review process for projects is pretty much the same as we've always done. After the project committee meeting, did I miss a slide in there? No, okay. The applicant will be informed that the project is outlined as ready for the project committee's review. Readiness will include a determination of the property owner's willingness to immediately sell, transfer, or donate the property. This is because of these short time frames. We don't have a whole lot of time for the project sponsors to be out negotiating or raising additional funds or trying to find properties that might fit into a portfolio. If your project qualifies and scores well, you'll be notified of the date, time, and place of the project committee meeting, and you'll be requested to come to Indianapolis for that project committee meeting so you can discuss the merits of your project with the project committee and answer any questions that the committee may have. If the project committee recommends your project for approval, it will be forwarded to the DNR director and then forwarded on to the governor for final approval confirmation. Notification after final acceptance or rejection of the proposed projects will be made by myself, the Next Level Trails Coordinator, within approximately 30 days after the project committee meeting. You'll know at the committee meeting, if you're there, that the project committee has forwarded on. Probably a good chance that your project is going to be fully done by then. So send project proposals. This screen has the address, Next Level Trails Trust, and this is all on the website, or you can send them to me electronically. The submission deadlines for projects. We'll start accepting project proposals on July 1st. Project committee deadlines for the meetings will be February 1st, May 1st, August 1st, and November 1st. For the project committee meeting that's in generally the following month. So August 1st is the deadline for project submissions for the meeting that will be, I think it's September 6th. The November 1st will be for the December meeting. February 1st will be for the March meeting. I truly, at this point in time, do not believe that we're going to have very much money left by March. If we get to the end of the fiscal year deadline in 23, I will be very surprised if there's funds left that could be committed after that point. My contact information, again, we can share all this, and all this is on the website. Let me pull up a couple more things, close out of this and see if I can get to some other things. Okay, I think a lot of people have been asking about the application for the Next Level Conservation Trust. It's very similar to the application that we used for the Bicentennial Nature Trust. The state form number, as you'll note on the top of this, is still pending. What I really highlighted in here is what's different in red is what's different from the application. It's just pretty much all the same things that you've seen in applications for the Harrison Trust or the President Benjamin Harrison Trust or the Bicentennial Trust. It's just a summary of your project proposal. There's one line in for the amount of money that you're requesting. There's some brackets here to put in how you're going to achieve your 3-to-1 matches, your total acquisition cost of the project, property taxes. We have added at the end of the application form some supplements that will certainly help us in our analysis, early analysis of the project, the narrative project description, location maps, aerials, project photographs, letters of support from the community that back up your statements in the scoring sheet that you'll see in a second, letters for your purchase agreement or letters of intent from your sellers. Like I said, we have to be able to move quickly on these things. Or if the project's already been purchased, a copy of your deed to the grantor, the title, the closing statement, and the title work. The bargain sale letters, if you have those that are going to play into your value considerations, endorsement letters, appraisals, surveys, environmental studies, etc. Again, we recite here when the applications are due and where the applications can be delivered to. Let me get one more thing up here for you. Pretty standard on our application form. And one more thing here. Here is the new scoring sheet, or the revised scoring sheet, and it's been modified slightly from what you may have seen on the website. Project maximizes partnerships, 2 or 3 points that can be available there. maximizes partnerships between public and private agencies. We have 1 or 2 points here. Maximizes external funding. So if you're coming in with a minimum of 3.1, 3-to-1 match, you get 1 point. If you can increase that up to around 2-to-1, you get 2 points, 1-to-1, 4 points. If the project is first for a local, in a local unit or county, you can get 2 points. That's to some extent subject to scoring. If a project comes in a local unit, and you don't show that you have local unit support, you're probably not going to get those points. You may get county points versus local points. There's a whole little mix of things that could happen in this scoring number here. A big one on these kind of non-subjective points are the project addresses need in an underserved area pursuant to the current statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan. That's 4 points. Project is endorsed by county or local officials, 2 points. The county or local community foundation endorsement is 2 points. And then below this gray bar here, we're going to get into things that are project specific. The project area protects or conserves previously unprotected land, the largest portion of it, 5 points. I told you everything was going to be weighted to new protections. The project has historical significance. That would be by a standard probably subject to the Indiana State Museums and Historic Sites or Department of Historic Preservation and Archaeology. The project contains significant natural features, and this is a non-inclusive list: barrens, wetlands, caves, bogs, prairies, etc. 3 points. The acquisition, we've phased this up a little bit from 25 to 50 to 75 to 100 acres. Larger the project, you get more points. The project, and then we get into a bunch of kind of subjective questions down here that your project narrative should probably address so that we're not missing anything when we score and review. The project provides multiple forms of outdoor recreation, fishing, hunting, bird watching, etc. That's up to 3 points. The project serves to enhance and protect water qualities of adjacent waterways, up to 3 points. Connects and links areas of significant habitat. That's 3 points, or up to 3 points. Threatened with being developed, that's again up to 3 points. Adjacent to other public accessible land that will enhance public use, up to 3 points. And the property has statewide significance that will draw areas from outside the local area. That's again up to 3 points. There's a total of 52 points, the maximum that you could get if you scored everything out to its max. So 26 points is what's needed to qualify for the application at this point in time. We will have the ability to award maybe special recognition points. That's going to be at the discretion of the DNR Technical Advisory Group. Those are basically the division directors and people that would be intimately involved in each one of these classifications of scoring criteria. That pretty much wraps up everything. I've gone through this very quickly. That has wrapped up a lot of what I wanted to present to you. So I guess we can go into, Andrea, if we want to start opening this up to questions. Let's try to keep the questions to program specifics and not project specifics if we can. And if we have time at the end, we can talk about project specific items, or you can email me or call me directly with questions about individual project specifics. Dan, do you have anything you want to add at this point before we open it up to questions?
No, I think it was pretty thorough, Tom. I appreciate that. And, just in looking through the chat, there's a various different questions among them. I see one, you're aware that protection and open to the public are sometimes incompatible. Well, yeah, we certainly are. These are being paid for with tax dollars, so open to the public will not be open for discussion, so to speak. If it's being paid for with tax dollars, it needs to be open to the public. Otherwise, we'll call that private land. But I'll let you run with it, Tom.
Okay.
Great. Tom, we have some questions in the chat, so I thought we would start with those and then open it up to additional questions. I believe that you addressed the first one, which is there an opportunity for the Lilly Foundation to contribute again? Again, I think you mentioned that, but I don't know if you want to just real quickly.
Well, one of the problems that we have with the ARP funds, and this is great that we have this money available, but we have very tight timeframes. If we got $10 million, for example, from the Lilly Foundation, that's great. But that $10 million becomes subject to the same restrictions and requirements that we have for the rest of the ARP funds. If we bring that all into, there's a fungibility question of money. So what we have said is, if somebody wanted to come in with a good sized chunk of money, that we either a single sponsor could use that money. We will, if somebody just comes in and says, I got a bunch of money I'd like to put into this, what we can do is ask that sponsor, what would you like to invest your money in? And we can look and see if we have projects that meet that criteria that could go to offset something. If they don't have any specific criteria, we could then maybe make a point at some point in time and say, hey, everybody, we're going to knock this down to 20% because we've got a big contribution from somebody. Those are all things that could occur. This program, this program is constantly in flex. I think as I've mentioned to a few people, we were getting changes from OMB and state budget agency as recently as a couple of weeks ago. That's one of the reasons we kind of held this off and have not made the announcements as quickly as we probably could have. Everything is in flux. We can go with this now, but if there's changes that we need to make, we're subject that we can make those changes on the fly. Protection in open areas, Dan, I certainly agree. There is no question in this program that we are talking about public access, public use, outdoor recreation, public health. And while I certainly agree that sometimes protection means that you can't have public access, this program is going to require public access, subject to the same kind of limitations that we have always allowed under Harrison Trust, Bicentennial Trust. Those programs both allow public access also. If you have a nature preserve and you want to close your nature preserve at sunset, you know, that's perfectly acceptable. If you're having a deer mitigation hunt on your property, certainly closing it to the public is a good idea for a short period of time. Those are all things that are acceptable to the overall general public use requirement. And we can talk about that. The individuals, as I think I want to make sure that everybody is aware, this is not a typical state grant program. This is a real estate acquisition program. We will either be acquiring fee simple interest for land that is going to be owned by the state of Indiana, or we will be acquiring a conservation easement over land that is held by the project sponsor. So what we do and what you have previously seen in conservation easements from the department are going to be pretty typical of what you're going to see under this program. There may be some additional reporting requirements that we're going to have to add, because we, as the DNR, are going to be responsible for making the reports to the state budget agency and OMB to be included in the overall state ARP reporting requirements. Let's see, what do we have next? A community foundation.
Yes. Yep. Question about the community foundation, Tom.
Community foundations are independent agencies that work for the betterment of communities across the state of Indiana. Almost every county, I can't think of any county, and a lot of localities have community foundations that are established for providing grants and doing things to assist the community. I don't know, there's probably a list of community foundations out there somewhere that would apply to individual counties, individual localities. I know, I'm pretty sure that there is a list of, there is an overarching community foundation organization similar to ILPA. And the community foundation portion, the Lilly Foundation was actively involved in supporting community foundations all over the state. And when we did the Bicentennial Nature Trust, the community foundations, that was a requirement of the Lilly funds, is that we encourage and consider community foundation involvement as significant in the projects. What I just took out of the scoring sheet was whether or not community is giving you extra points if the community foundation put money into the project. You can still have a community foundation that would put money into the project that would become one of your financial partners up in, was it A or B of the scoring sheet. So there are, that's kind of a thing, okay? The application includes the option to attach a deed if the project is already purchased. Would those purchased existing projects be eligible for funding? Okay, projects that have been purchased, previously purchased, we're going to be in the consideration of, is it previously protected? Since we're looking at promoting new land protections, if a group, if a land trust has bought a piece of property, it's unprotected at the current time, it could be promoted as either match to another additional property, in which case we would put a conservation easement over both properties, or it could be used as a freestanding element of, here's a property that we have purchased, and now we want to permanently protect that property. So yes, it does. If it's something that currently has a conservation easement over it with DNR, that then creates a whole different scenario. I think the previously purchased properties, you know, like as Emily has noted here, are a perfect match for the portfolio match scenario. Can be used where you have previously purchased properties, new properties. We're going to roll those all in and create a new conservation area, new conservation interest in those existing properties. I hope that answers your question, Emily, and we can answer it. We'll ask questions after we get through this list of questions. It was meant by financially capable, and what documents might be needed to show that. That's a good question. I'm not saying that we need to produce financial statements, but we do need to be able to show that whoever is sponsoring the project is capable of not only completing the financial transaction, but also of the long-term stewardship and management of the property. So I'm not as hugely concerned about seeing financial statements that show you have $10 million in a trust fund. It's more about, do you have a track record, and can you show that you have the ability to do these things, and maybe to raise money, maybe to whatever it is. It's not meant to be exclusive of anyone, but it is meant to show that in any of these projects, whoever takes on the project should be financially capable of completing the project and managing the project long-term. Let's see, can we explain local unit and county? Okay, a local unit is a city or town in our definition here. A county, of course, is a county governmental entity. I'm kind of going to throw out, I don't think townships are necessarily local units. It's a township is somewhere between a local unit and a county governmental entity. So I think right now we're really talking about municipal boundaries, municipal projects, and county projects. Let's see. Would you like to hear about funding already closed? When we get to the questions, example, a land trust buys a property, closes in fee title. Could that apply to the yes, it could apply. If you have already closed or you're getting ready to close on a property, and you get to the July 1st deadline, the August 1st deadline, you have, I mean, if you have a purchase, if you are, let's say you're going to close after August 1st in this question, you already have title work, you have a purchase agreement, you have all those things. You're just moving toward that closing. Yes, that's certainly, we can certainly look at that under this scenario. Understand that the funding coming from this program, as we unfortunately have to deal with, we have hurdles, we have a lot of things that are going to happen. Once the project is completed, once the project is approved, it will take 4 to 6 months in a general consensus to get a project to where it is fundable. So if you have a project that's approved in August, probably the end of the year into the first of next year is the first that we're going to have funds available. And that's on a pretty aggressive timeline. If there's any hiccups along the way, it could take 6 months to a year to get a closing to occur on the funds that we're looking at. That's why the commitment of funds is critically important. The next question is the scoring sheet online now? No, it is not. I will get the website updated with the new scoring sheet and the application pending state form approval should be posted here within the next few days, definitely before the July 1st application deadline. Can we share more about valuation and language in the conservation easements that could be acquired by the state? Well, valuation, of course, is supported in my parlance, that is supported by an appraisal. There are multiple forms of appraisals and valuations that could be used on different projects. The bigger the project, the more in-depth the valuation support that has to be included. So I would just generally say that a valuation is an appraised value. Appraisals, of course, as we talked about, we can use those as part of the verifiable cost that can be added into the project, the total cost of the project for the match requirement calculation. Language in the conservation easements. There will be no substantial differences in these conservation easements than we have previously used in any of our other projects. We have terms and conditions, we have prohibited uses, we have allowable uses by the grantor. There will be some enforcement provisions in the conservation easement. and the conservation easement is granted in perpetuity. Other than that, anybody that wants a draft of a conservation easement, I can put one up fairly quickly. And I think that when we do conservation easements, I tend to draft the conservation easement for a specific property rather than a general property type. So please understand that even if I post a draft, or if I can send out a draft to anybody, that it is just that. It is not specific to the final determination of the terms and conditions of a conservation easement. They haven't changed much. They're pretty standard. Anybody that's done any bicentennial or Harrison Trust or Heritage Trust in the past and is probably very aware of what the terms and conditions are. They haven't changed hardly changed at all in the 18 years that I've been with the state. So that we can talk about that more when we get into specific questions. If a project with $1 million value is submitted and the seller is willing to give a bargain sale of $750,000, would that project get fully funded by the NLT? Yes. Yes, it would get fully funded. It would get fully funded to the extent of the $250,000 could be part of your match. So you have to be careful in saying that the $750,000 plus your closing costs, plus your cost of acquisition, appraisal fees, etc., all go into that verified cost calculation. And then we can close up to a specific limit that would be limited by 100%. This is a complicated question. So what you can't do is take money out of a project. If your cost is, let's say in this scenario, your cost is $750,000, you're using your $250,000 as match. You cannot get more than $750,000 because you still have your match requirement to be used in that scenario. If you're $750,000 and there's another $10,000 in expenses, you could get the $760,000 because it's less than the $1 million plus the 70 plus the closing costs at 75%. I hope that makes sense in how that plays out. It's a little cumbersome, but it's pretty easy to figure out when you actually are sitting down looking at hard numbers. If a land trust is requesting funding for a new property and in addition purchased a property nearby in the last 3 to 5 years, yes, you could do that as a portfolio type acquisition. You're in the same basic area, you have the same basic type of properties, as long as both properties meet the requirements of the program. So if you have a property that's, got 3 or 4 houses on it, that may not fit the program dynamic, or something that was acquired maybe under a life estate. So as long as they're both eligible for the program, yes, you could use the previously purchased property as match for the new property that's being purchased. Let's see, Phil, you're asking for, how does having structures, house, tillable acreage complicate approving the project to get to a natural area? Tillable acreage, we're going to have, you cannot earn money on ARPA funds. So you're going to have to your tillable acreage will have to be converted to, nature area within a relatively short period of time. And that's something that we have worked on with a lot of conservation easements in the past. Houses and structures, you're probably going to end up having to segregate any houses or structures out of the conservation area that you're going to be dealing with here. If your intent is to tear those structures down, then we're going to have to look very closely at the value of those structures in relationship to the value of the project that we're looking at. If you have a fairly small tract of land and you've got a $300,000 house that sits on it, you're probably not going to be in a financial position to be able to tear down the house or even acquire the house under this program, because it's directed at conservation land acquisitions. We have also discussed the complications, for example, of acquiring a piece of property where there might be an extended life estate, for example. Those properties would not be eligible under this program because it needs to be relatively quickly fully used for public access and conservation. So something that's going to be held out for several years while you complete a life estate, that's not going to work. If it is something, if you have some tillable acreage and you're going to do tillage for a year or two, until you can get it to where you can plant a prairie grass, for example, or trees on a piece of property, then that's probably going to be allowable as long as the funding, as long as any income from the farming activity goes back into the property. This is something that would typically be kind of allowable on most of our state programs, but because of the federal strings that are attached to this, any money that is attributable, any income that is attributable to the property, a timber harvest, tillable, farm rents, anything like that, is going to come off of the grant value and create significant problems going forward. The PowerPoint will be at some point in time available. I need to run it through a few other traps before we post it, but yes. Other federal forms may be eligible as match to this program. Any idea whether the properties acquired under this program would be eligible for match? That is the program requirement of the federal funds. So if you bought property, for example, under this program, it would not be eligible because it was paid for by federal funds. It would not be eligible for some other federal programs. Land and water, for example, we know you can't use other federal forms as match for the land and water funding. So you can't cross. A lot of times you would see on a Harrison Trust deal, for example, that you might cross match some of these things. You might be doing a big project with some Harrison Trust money, but also using Lake Michigan Coastal or Land and Water, and that's all fine and good. What we're seeing here is that the requirements of the federal program, not the ARPA requirements, but of the federal program that you're using, whether or not that program can allow federal match dollars to be used in that program. Okay, is that, and I don't know if that's clear to everybody, but like I said, if you were planning on using land and water, for example, I know I talked to somebody just recently that they were planning on doing a deal that was going to include land and water or coastal. I don't remember which. Both of those programs specifically say that you can't have additional federal funds in that program. So That's where we come to with this. If somebody's going to try to match ARPA dollars with ARPA dollars, that's something that we're going to have to take to the state budget agency and get clarification on. Unfortunately, I don't have that clarification as of today. Let's see here. What else do we got? Thank you, Emily. You mentioned not wanting few agencies to consume the bulk of the funding, but there is no project limit. Is there a consideration of limiting the amount of funding distributed in the first round to allow projects in the second round? Julie, I'm going to say that that's kind of on the fly right now. If we see that there are a significant amount of the funding is going to get chewed up with the first round of applications, we may have to move some of that funding into a subsequent round. We specifically established the program with no project limits because of the complexities and the timelines that we're facing with this ARPA money. What we have found is that there are some big projects out there that are standing ready to start coming in pretty quickly. So if we start to see that the money is going to get, if I get 10 projects in the first round and they're all $3 to $5 million projects and they're all independent projects, it could go that way. I don't know. We're just going to have to see how everybody scores it. And then we will have to bring in Director Bortner. We'll have to bring in other executives in the state to make sure that everybody agrees with that decision to go forward or to hold back. If we see that a large amount of is going to go to a couple of projects, I will not be adverse to holding some money back and not doing all the projects that come in the first round and limiting it to some extent. That's not what I want to do, but I also want everybody to have a chance to participate in this program.
Yeah, I think the idea, folks, the reason that this thing was set up with no high-end limit was because of the timeline that we have, not knowing what projects were out there. What we didn't want to have happen is this thing to be filled with small projects and we left money on the table. So we had to get the information together in a hurry and throw it out there very open-ended. So to Tom's point, we're sort of making this up as we go. The best advice we can give is get your projects in now. And then, it would be wonderful to be, as he said, to have all this stuff obligated at one time, because you've got a session coming up. The state is in excellent financial condition. We don't know what's going to be potentially out there, if anything. We're certainly, you folks have been around this long enough to know that you can't speculate on what could or couldn't come out of a legislative session. What we know today is we have $25 million that has to be spent in a very short amount of time. So depending on what you folks sent in will be how we react to that.
I'm glad Dan said that. I didn't want to be pandering to the legislature, but if we have the majority of this money committed by the December meeting, that's a heck of a story to be sending out to the legislature going into a budget session. I think all of you know that we have wanted a permanent funding source for conservation in Indiana for quite a while. And this will be a second demonstration. Bicentennial was the first one. This will be a second demonstration that significant funding for conservation is doable within the state.
And for the recorded record, we don't have an opinion, do we, Tom?
No, we don't. Okay, so are we able to use property currently owned that have WRP and WRE easements as matching properties? Yes. But as I noted in the presentation, if you are using properties, you have to look at the encumbered value of the property. WRP, for example, in various areas of the state could go anywhere from $750 an acre down in the Muscatatuck, or maybe $1,000 an acre down in the Muscatatuck, to $1,500 an acre on the Wabash, up to I think we just paid $2,900 an acre. We're looking at a number of like $2,900 an acre for a significant holding in Stark County. That's all in WRP. So it's very regionalized, and it's value driven, whether or not it's going to be eligible or not. Is it eligible? Yes. Is it something that we're going to have to consider? Yes. So value becomes the driving factor. How do you value a WRP easement that has been placed on property and is currently existing? That's always a good story. It's always a question for an appraiser. Let's go on. So John, let's see. The issue is more for sellers who won't wait until August 1st to close. I don't have an answer for you. If your seller won't wait until August 1st, that's a risk that your land trust is going to have to take. You're going to have to be able to understand whether or not you can close and maybe or maybe not receive the funding. That's the same risk as you would be facing if this money wasn't available. So I don't know quite how to make that any better for you, but that's the answer. Yes, it will, and we are still subject to all of our requirements that we have to have in doing our due diligence on these, making the land acquisition offer, coming back in, routing it through the entire state signature process, which is the DNR Executive Office, Indiana Department of Administration, the State Budget Agency, and the Attorney General's Office. And just an example, the Attorney General's Office has 45 days to complete a review of an application once it gets to the Attorney General's Office. You know, so we typically right now are running pretty much the full 3 months plus or minus to get a project fully committed and approved. And that's if we got the due diligence done day one, John. So yeah, we're still under those circumstances. So when you're writing these projects, and I'll make sure that this is noted more than one time as we're going through all of this, but as we do projects, you have to build in enough lead time into your negotiations with the sellers, 6 months or a year, to get your funding approved and to get all the way through the closing process if you're using state funds. If you have a bridge loan available, if you have a straw man that can step up, great. You make your acquisitions and you just hold it until such time as we're ready to close. But yeah, unfortunately, I can't accelerate the timeline of our internal situations just because of this funding is available. See, Emily, let's see, just to clarify the CE evaluation project. I understand that the B&T easement we're given as a blanket value of 75. That's not necessarily correct. The B&T projects, to a large extent, use 75% of value. But if we could have 50%, we could have 80%. One of the things that I go back and look at when I'm looking at valuing a conservation easement is what was the original number that was done on the project. And if we did a 75%, then the residual value is 75% of today's current value is one of the ways that we would look at that. So if we had a 50%, you got the same thing. And there are a few of them floating around out there. We did 80s or 90s on some of the old conservation easements. So it's actually property specific as to how that valuation would have to occur. You're saying the projects, they say Bob Neary, let's see, John Lawrence, but to be clear, Tom, are you saying that projects will only be eligible if the application prior to closing? No. There's plenty of wiggle room there. I mean, if you buy a project and then make the application, buy a property, yeah, that's still going to be eligible. It's just in John's scenario, he has a property owner that isn't going to wait until August 1st to even find out if we have the funding available or not. He wants to close. The assumption that I was making is that he wants to close before August 1st. I can't do anything to help that. You could still make the application, but my funding is not going to be available probably until December, 3-4 months out at least. But yes, if you closed on something already prior to making an application, yeah, that's perfectly acceptable. That's where we get into the question of whether or not you submit a purchase agreement, you submit a deed, you submit a letter of intent. So yeah, that's all acceptable. Yes, you answered my question. Let's see, Cliff. Appraisal requirements, since they may play an important role with bargain sales. Appraisals, we are probably going to be fairly liberal in this program, but when you have to do appraisals, you really need to come in with a supported value at the time of application. If you have to have an appraisal going forward, that becomes part of your project. The one thing that I always caution in the situation of a bargain sale is, under my understanding, I'm not an accountant, I'm not an attorney, my understanding of the IRS regulations are that the donor must provide the value support for the 8283 tax write-off form. The donee, the person accepting the donation, all they sign on the 8283 is that they received the donation. They are not certifying the value of that donation. And I know you know all this, Cliff, but it is important that the donor is the one that provides that value. If you want to provide an appraisal to the donor, that's up to you, but you also run the risk of, when you provide that appraisal, you become at least partially liable for any overstatement of a tax deduction that would result from the use of that appraisal. That's why we at DNR, at least, if it's a donation, they have to do their own appraisal. They can't use my appraisal of a property value for that purpose. I hope that answers your question. But yes, in negotiating a bargain sale, appraisal is very important. You need to know what you're dealing with. So I am always supportive of having an actual appraisal done on the property that you're acquiring. Could the NGO purchase privately owned WRP restored wetlands that already has a conservation easement held by NRCS? I think we just covered that a second ago, but yes, that would be eligible, recognizing that the value is probably going to be established subject to the NRCS conservation easement. And this is something, by the way, that we have done a lot of in the past. So we just would make our acquisition subject to the NRCS conservation language. And that's pretty simple for us to do. That's good. Julie said that's a good problem. Let's see, carry on the message. Thank you, John. I appreciate you carrying the message to the General Assembly. Gotcha, thank you. Let's see. There is a note on the site, FAQs. Harrison Trust or other state funds can qualify as match. Is that specific to projects that will ultimately be fee transfer? No, either one. You can do a conservation easement or you can do a fee transfer, can be used as Harrison Trust match or most other state fundings, anything else that might be available. Harrison Trust can be used for both fee simple purchases by the state and for conservation easement acquisitions from a conservation partner. Is there another scenario in which that would happen? Specific projects that will ultimately fee transfer to the state. That's something that we will have to talk about in your specific portfolio. Whether or not we can then turn around. Yeah, that's good. That's going to be a different scenario. If you're planning on using projects that are already protected under a conservation easement and your sole idea is to transfer that to the state, that's going to be a questionable funding. So we're going to have to, because that's certainly not a new protection. So we'll have to look at that very closely, as we would have to look at the value of that scenario very closely. Let's see, Richard, if the project has some tillable crop acreage after purchasing the property, can the tillable crop acreage be enrolled in CRP? Not if it's going to produce income to the land trust, to the grantor. There are ways that it can be done, I think, but that's something that we're going to have to look at on a project by project basis. Doing a CRP planting where the NRCS is going to pay for it, but you're not going to receive any long-term benefit from it as far as income, as far as a crop, as an annual CRP payment, that's probably much more palatable within the program scope. And that looks like that wraps up the questions in the chat. So I guess if anybody has any questions, go ahead, open up your camera and your microphone, and let's start talking. We've got some more time that we can go. If anybody wants to stay on and hear all of this, please do. Please, if you do get on, please introduce yourself, name and your organization.
Tom, there is a question about the score sheet. So I guess regarding availability of the updated score sheet, if that's something that you can send to me. I'm going to post it. I'll post it on. Posted.
I'm going to post it on the website when I post the updated application. And that will be in the next week or so. That way you don't have to distribute it to everybody.
Thank you.
Hey, Tom,
hey, Cliff.
This is Cliff Chapman, Central Indiana Land Trust. Just going back to the appraisal question that I raised, I was just wanting to make sure that folks are really careful using a general land appraisal and making sure that if timber value is incorporated into an appraisal, that the appraiser actually understands how to do that, and just the due diligence, because the numbers, some of these projects might be adding some zeros to what we're typically used to, because it's an opportunity to do projects that we wouldn't be able to do a few years ago. And so that's where the appraisal just plays such an important role. And spending the extra money and getting like a really, somebody who's qualified to do it right, because it's going to, with talking about using it for match for these funds, it's a really important document for us.
I absolutely agree, Cliff. If any of you know me, I'm not a huge supporter of timber appraisals in a lot of instances. And they are really only supported, in my opinion. I'm not stating this. This is a personal opinion of mine. Most land in Indiana is transitional. If you are supporting appraisal, timber appraisal, you have to really have timber land that has a timber usage. You can't say that all of my comparables are timbered residential, rural residential, estate size lots, and then turn around and say that the timber value on an individual property contributes excessively to that property value. The value was compared against timbered lots. The only difference is between the value of the timber on the subject and the value of the timber on the comparables, and whether or not that is something that can be adequately compared in the public market. We see a lot of times in southern Indiana that a timber company will buy 40 acres. They'll come in, harvest the timber off of it, divide it into four or five lots, and then sell that package for more money than they paid for the property. Well, in that scenario, the contributory timber value is negligible, even though they may have harvested a significant amount of timber off of the property. So that's something that a good appraiser who is experienced in timber valuation can certainly look at. Somebody that's, you're trying to do something maybe with a residential quality appraiser, they're never gonna understand that concept. I don't like to point figures, but that's exactly what happens. It's also an interesting way, timber is also an interesting way for the IRS to hang you up on a donated property, because that timber value has to be whenever you're doing a evaluation for the IRS, for any kind of an IRS qualified donation, it has to be made to IRS standards. And there aren't a whole lot of appraisers out there that even understand the IRS standards, much less how to do these contributory value issues in that structure. Great question, Cliff. Thank you.
John, I think you're trying to ask a question and you're muted.
Okay. How about now?
Good.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
You
Gotcha.
can hear me? Okay. John Craddock, and I'm the chair of our Muncie, Delaware Community Foundation Land Conservation and Acquisition Committee. And during the last program that the state had with the bicentennial funds, those all went through our committee for approval before it went to the board. And the board always followed our recommendations. We've got a good committee put together with a lot of good technical people on it that have got good background information in this area. My question is, if I understood this correctly, we could use community development funds for the match of the 3-to-1 match. Did I hear that correctly?
I believe so, John. I think that the thing to look at is you have to look at the sourcing guidelines of the community development funds to make sure they can be used with other federal funds. Does that make sense?
Okay, we pretty much ran out of funds and used just about all of the money that came into us. Fortunately, our community has a fair amount of foundations in town for a town our size. And so some of our foundations have have kept that fund alive by providing some yearly donations into it. So most of the money in that fund has actually come from local Muncie-based foundations. Does that change that answer a little?
That does not, yeah, that's a great scenario, John. I think it's something that is very doable. Under Bicentennial, you remember that there was, we were actually promoting the idea of community foundations being involved financially as partners. The only thing
Yes.
we've really switched around here is whether the community foundation, we want the community foundation's involvement and support, but if the community foundation is going to be a financial partner, then we just move them up to that partners category in one of the first in number A in the scoring sheet that you'll see. When you see the scoring sheet, you'll see that it was, if you have more than two partners, 2 or more partners, that you get extra points. So we've moved those points just up into one single category, rather than having a separate category for community foundation financial support. Yes, as long as there's no federal strings that you have to deal with, whatever money you want to bring in from a community foundation we're good to go. As far as using that as match, that's great. That's exactly what we're looking for. So
Thank you. I want to thank you very much, and I want to just personally thank you for this program. It has been very educational.
okay, we're
Tom, I've got a question. Bob Easter was Stewardship Director with Niches Land Trust.
Hi, Bob.
We've you mentioned that you can't earn money off of agricultural lands through like a CRP program in perpetuity. It would an NRCS program such as an EQIP program to do so seeding and restoration. That's all good.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Very
those would become, yeah. If you can get grants to help you with your restoration work, all those kind of things, that's perfectly acceptable. We just found out not long ago that when we had a meeting with the SBA just 3-4 weeks ago, they brought up the issue about not being able to have any kind of an income fund source, and that will then affect how the reporting requirements go. So this would extend down to leasing the property for, some kind of a function. We do the same thing with trails occasionally. As long as it's open to the public, can somebody else come in and use it for some other purpose? That's great. EQIP is a great example of a program that's going to do kind of a one-time thing for a specific purpose.
Indeed.
To help you on your property. That's fine, because you're not profiting from that. It's the money that comes in on a CRP lease, where you're going to have an annual revenue stream, and that stream is probably disappearing into your staffing and
Absolutely.
all kinds of other functions, which is understandable, and it's on most projects, it's a great idea to have. Most of our CEs have a point of kind of a non-income producing category in there. You have the same thing if you're trying to sell timber off of one of these properties. If you're doing some timber harvest for a specific, like to get rid of ash trees, that's one thing. If you're doing a general harvest you buy a piece of property, you're doing a general harvest, you're trying to rake off the cash, that's going to be problematic in the long term, we think. And unfortunately, I don't know until we have an instance, as Dan Bortner said a little while ago, we're playing this a little bit by ear, and until we have a specific instance, we aren't going to really know how to handle it until it's addressed. The same thing, as I said, you know, if somebody wants to come in using ARP dollars to match the ARP, if it came from a Ready grant or a community foundation grant that had ARP funds available, you've got the same question that's going to come up, and we're going to have to take it and get an answer to that question. So, good question. I think that we all have, we all want to see our properties get developed as nicely as we can. Niches has had a long-standing, you know, great projects, and so we're hoping to keep that, everybody to keep that going. So,
Well, we got a good
Okay.
one for you, so we'll send it in.
Okay, well, good. Okay, who else we got? Anything else?
I think you might have covered everything.
Oh,
So
that's great.
well, your presentation was so thorough and we had such good questions. I wanted to just note John Ketzenberger made a really great comment in the chat, and that's just the importance that we are all, everyone that's able to on this call, that we are, you know, thanking the governor's office and our lawmakers that this program is available, and you know, being able to carry that message about the value and importance and really the ongoing need of this funding and why it's important to our communities. You know, that's something that all of us can really play a big role in. So thank you, John, for bringing that up. And if there aren't any questions, just really wanted to thank Director Bortner and Tom. I think everybody recognizes how challenging and cumbersome the guidelines, the ARP guidelines that you've had to work with have been. And so just appreciate all of the time and commitment that you've put into this program. It's really so important to all of us. And you've been so thoughtful in developing this, and we really appreciate it. So thank you so much, and thank you for this meeting today.
Thank you, Andrea. We appreciate it. You've been very instrumental in helping get this off the ground, and we do appreciate that also.
It is certainly our
There was
pressure.
something that was just crossing my mind a second ago. I was trying to think of what it was here. Something just popped into my mind. Go ahead, Dan.
It's certainly our pleasure to be a part of this today, as we said in the beginning, folks. And you know, obviously, time is of the essence. Be flexible. Be understanding. Any little missteps we have along the way they're just going to happen, folks. But at the end of the day, it's a good day for the state of Indiana. We will make this work. We will spend all the money.
Yep, I certainly